Platting Board will now come to order. It's October 3rd, 2012 at 6:35 p.m. May I have the roll call, please?
Lendl Story. Steve Abel.
Here.
Ken Fuller.
Here.
Jody Moses. Here. Daniel Young.
Present.
Brent Cole. Anthony Cange.
Here.
Trevor Edmondson.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is approval of action summaries. May I have a motion to approve the action summaries, please? Mr. Edmondson moves and Mr. Cange seconds. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition? I have one change. Oh, actually, it's to the minutes. We're not to the minutes yet. So, seeing and hearing no opposition, the motion passes. The next item on the agenda is the minutes of Wednesday, June 6, 2012, and the minutes of Wednesday, July 18th, 2012. May I have a positive motion to approve the minutes? Mr. Edmondson so moves. Mr. Fuller seconds. Is there any discussion or opposition? I have one modification. On June 6th, on page 2 of 10, at the very bottom of the page, board member Fuller confirmed he believes he can be, and the word should be impartial rather than partial. Nope. Is there any other discussion or opposition? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. We're now to special orders of business, disclosures. Does anybody have any disclosures? Mr. Edmondson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. In case S11952-1, Eagle Point, Phase 9, I'd like to disclose that Bob Peterson, the owner of the Peterson Group, the company which I work for, has a minority interest in this project. Personally, it's not involved. The company is not involved in the project, so the company, the Peterson Group, for which I'm employed, has no involvement or interest in the project, and I personally don't have any involvement or interest in the project and feel I can remain impartial in this case.
Thank you. May I have a positive motion directing Member Edmondson to participate? Mr. Cange and Mr. Cole seconds. Is there any, Mr. Cange, would you direct or address your motion, please?
As Mr. Edmondson pointed out, he doesn't have a personal interest in this project, and I feel, based on his comments, that he can act fairly, so I move to direct Mr. Edmondson to participate in case S11952-1.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Are there any other disclosures or conflicts of interest? Mr. Cole. Oh.
In the case of S-11951-1, many years ago, I represented the person who I believe to be the landowner who is seeking the modification of the restrictive plat note. I don't represent that person now, and I don't think anything about my previous representation would affect my ability to act fairly and impartially in this matter.
Thank you. Is there any, well, may I have a positive motion directing Board Member Cole to participate? Please. Mr. Fuller and Mr. King seconds. Mr. Fuller, would you speak to your motion, please?
Based on Mr. Cole's testimony, I would move that he would participate, as he can be impartial.
Thank you. Is there any discussion from the board? Is there any opposition? The motion passes. Mr. Cole, you're directed to participate. Are there any other disclosures? I have several for myself. In the case of S11829-2, Spruce Heights subdivision, tracks A1 and C1, my firm has ongoing work with the petitioner on another property. I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board tonight. I can remain impartial in fact and action as a member of the board without personal bias. My past involvement and personal interest will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case. May I have a positive motion directing me to participate? Mr. Cange and Mr. Edmondson seconds it. Mr. Cange, will you speak to your motion, please?
In case S11829-2, based on the testimony of the chair, I believe there's no bias and the chair can act fairly in the case. I move to direct the chairman to participate.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or opposition? Hearing and seeing none, I'm directed to participate in that case. In case S11952-1, Eagle Point subdivision phases A, B, C, D, and E, my firm has ongoing work with the petitioner's representative on another property. My firm has also worked for the petitioner in the past, which was in 1984. I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board. I can remain impartial in fact and action as a member of this board without personal bias. My past involvement and personal interest will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case. May I have a positive motion directing me to participate, please? Mr. Cole and Mr. Edmondson seconds. Mr. Cole, would you speak to your motion, please?
Based upon the testimony that you presented in the matter of S-11952-1 and the disclosures that you made, it appears to me that you meet the criteria, and I would support the motion to direct you to participate in that matter.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or opposition? Hearing and seeing none, I'm directed to participate. Thank you. And then at the end? Okay. Are there any other disclosures or conflicts of interest? The next item on the agenda is new business, public hearings. The first hearing is case S11829-2, Spruce Heights, Providence Edition subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A year and a half ago, the Platting Board approved the preliminary plat of Spruce Heights subdivision. They're now asking for a first 18-month time extension for this preliminary plat. The department recommends approval of the 18-month time extension to April 3rd, 2014. That recommendation is also is written down on page 2 of your packet, about the middle of the page. Additionally, The petitioner requests an amendment to this approved preliminary plat. The petitioner's amendment is because Tract B1 of the preliminary plat does not need to be included in the plat in order to vacate the 50th Avenue right-of-way. The department recommends approval of this amendment to the approved preliminary plat and corresponding changes because of removing that tract. The changes are reflected on pages 2 through 5 of your packet. So the department recommends approval of the amendment to the approved preliminary plat subject to the conditions as written on pages 2 through 5. The board can simply just approve as they're written in the staff report. You don't have to speak to each change. However, I have a few changes that aren't in here that I'd like to that staff would like to ask the board that we'd like to ask the board to make. They are the deletion of condition 9 and the corresponding plat note, which is 15H. And that's because the RO district is considered a commercial district and it's developed with a hospital. There's no need for the residential landscaping to be required along the north lot boundary of this subdivision. So that's a deletion of condition 9 and the corresponding plat note 15H. Secondly, we'd like to ask the board to add the words resolve the need to condition number 13, and that's because there's no development plans at this time, and the comprehensive site grading and drainage plan and erosion and sediment control plan can be handled at time of building permit. So the words resolve the need to condition 13. Finally, there's an addition that we discovered. The hospital has a driveway that goes into the 50th Avenue right-of-way. Therefore, there needs to be an easement over that driveway in this location when the 50th Avenue right-of-way is vacated. The recommended wording from the department is record an access agreement on municipal form providing access to Spruce Heights Subdivision Addition 3, Tract B per plat 68-111. And I provided that wording to the chair. I have it written down here. If someone would like to see a copy of it, I can read it slower also. The wording is record an access agreement on municipal form providing access to Spruce Heights Subdivision Addition 3, Tract B per plat 68-111. And that'll allow that driveway from the hospital, which is now in 50th Avenue right-of-way, to be on the within the subdivision's property, protected in an easement. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? The procedures by which the public may speak to the Platting Board at this meeting is after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Commission Rules of Procedure. Petitioners, including all of his or her representatives, have 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., have 5 minutes, and individuals have 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the board. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the board. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Platting Division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based on the based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either A, a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503, or B, an appeal of the board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. With that, we're going to open the public hearing. Would the petitioner's representative please step forward, state your name, spell your last name, and if you would like to reserve some time for rebuttal, now's a good time to do it.
Mr. Chair, my name is Mark Davis, D-A-V-I-S. I represent the petitioner in Salina Surveys. We're in agreement with all the modifications that the board recommended. We have no objections, and I'm just a little curious on how the procedure works. And since the package is going to change slightly, I guess I would like to officially, is a motion going to be spoken to the changes by the board?
Well, we haven't made the motion yet, but do you have any concerns about the changes, or have you?
No, we've talked to staff of Fair Mount, and we're in favor of all their changes. We just need to make sure they're official, I guess.
Okay. So after the public testimony, the board will discuss those changes and render an opinion.
Okay, thanks. We'll save our time for rebuttal then. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the public wishing to testify tonight? Anybody at all? Mr. Davis, would you like to use your time for rebuttal? Are there any questions of Mr. Davis, the petitioner's representative? Hearing and seeing none, the public hearing is closed. The matter now rests with the board. May I have a positive motion for approval of the plat for the first 18-month time extension? Mr. Fuller. Mr. Edmondson seconds. Mr. Fuller, would you address your motion, please?
For the chair, in the case of S11829-2, I move that the request for the 18-month extension be granted.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Are there any findings of fact? Is there any thing that we're basing our decision on tonight?
It fits the criteria and the automatic request for the first 18 months, and I plan to support my motion.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin.
One of the things that the board can do, has as a tool, is they can just refer to the staff report and say that we recommend approval, or we make a motion to approve this for the reasons stated in the staff report. You can also enumerate, actually read out the ones that you find. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody on the board who agrees with the staff packet and finds that supporting information to support this motion? Mr. Kange.
In the case mentioned above, I find that based on testimony of the petitioner's representative and staff comments to approve the plat for the 18 months, subject to the changes discussed, I can go through each of those changes, or would that be a separate motion?
A different motion.
That would be for the next motion.
Okay, well then, based on staff comments, I tend to support the motion.
Thank you. Mr. Edmondson.
Actually, my chair, Mr. Chair, my question was in regards to the motion. I think you clarified it already. The first motion that we're considering here is for the time extension, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I intend to support the motion as well, since it's within the parameters of requesting this first 18th month extension. So I think the petitioner has requested it in the manner that they're able to, and so I intend to support it as well.
Thank you. Ms. Moses.
I intend to support the time extension requests. The conditions on the preliminary plat have not yet been met, and a final plat has not been submitted to the Planning Division for recordation. A first 18-month time extension is needed before the plat can be recorded. The petitioner is exercising his right to request a first-time extension. The time extension request was submitted prior to the expiration of the preliminary plat as required by AMC 21.15.115.d.2. A copy of the summary actions minutes and staff report relating to this case are included in the staff packet.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seems to be a lot of support. Is there any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, this motion passes. May I have a motion in the same case for approval of the amendment to approve preliminary plat? Anyone at all? Ms. Moses and Mr. Edmondson seconds.
In case S-11829-2, Spruce Heights subdivision, tracks A1 and C1, I move for the approval of an amendment to approve preliminary plat subject to conditions 1 through 15 in the, 1 through 16 in the staff packet, pages 2 through 5, with the deletion of what is currently numbered condition number 9 and condition 15H, the addition of a condition to read, record an access agreement on municipal form providing access to Spruce Heights subdivision addition 3 tract B per plat 68-111. Additionally, adding on current numbered condition 13 to read, resolve the need to submit the following to private development for review and approval prior to the final plat approval, and changing or ensuring that each condition is numbered properly numerically, and subs under each condition alphabetically as they're out of order. I think that's it.
Thank you. I have a question for clarification on your motion. Are you intending to have this motion as stated, where item number 4 and 6 are deleted, and item 11 and 12 are also deleted, as shown on this packet, and 15B and 15F?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that was the intent, to include those deletions as represented in the packet and then renumber.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on this motion? Yes.
Are we deleting 15H also?
Through the chair, my motion included that as a deletion.
Yes.
Sorry, and maybe staff can weigh in on this, but was there, as it's numbered now, adding a number 17 with language that was recommended by staff also?
That is
Ready to
included.
hear that.
That she read that into the record, yes. Mr. Edmondson.
I'd just like to speak to the motion that I intend to support the motion and find that the petitioner's amended preliminary plat does not include track B1 because plat 6872 shows that the East 50th Avenue right-of-way dedication came entirely from lots 1 through 10, block 7. And based on the staff's recommendations and the information provided in our packet, that the conditions have been met and that conditions relating to track B should be deleted since it's no longer part of this replat. So,
Thank you. Are there any other discussion? Are there any other findings? Is there any rationale to support this motion? Well, I intend to support this motion, and I refer to the comments from staff as well as the petitioner. The petitioner and the staff have worked together and have agreed on these conditions in front of us. They appear to meet the requirements of the municipality. They're outlined on page 2 and 3, and I intend to support this motion. Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to the action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record unless written request is submitted to the planning division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503 or an appeal of the board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. The next case on the agenda is case number S11951-1, that Discovery Heights Phase 2 subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request for modification of a 50-foot bluff setback line for Discovery Heights Phase 2 subdivision, Block 4, Lots 8 and 9. The reason this platting action is before the board tonight is because of a building permit for a proposed addition on Lot 8. During that building permit process, it was determined that the proposed addition encroached approximately 5 feet into this 50-foot bluff setback line. The 50-foot bluff setback was originally required and platted under platting case S9179 for Southport subdivision number 1. This setback was subsequently carried over under platting case S9518 for Discovery Heights Phase 2 subdivision. The setback is intended to follow the top of the bluff, providing a suitable buffer for structures. According to the petitioner's representative, the bluff setback seems to arbitrarily change direction at the point at which lots 9 and 10 meet, no longer following the top of the bluff. The petitioner proposes to align the bluff setback so as to parallel the existing bluff contours. More specifically, the petitioner proposes that the bluff setback line starting at the existing point of the property line between lots 9 and 10, located 101.62 feet from the southwest property corner, be extended to the existing property line between lots 8 and 9 at a point 10.31 feet from the southeast corner of Lot 8, continuing to a point along the rear property line of Lot 8 at a distance of 15.47 feet. For reference, I would suggest you look at the survey submitted by the petitioner on page 5 of your staff packet. According to the survey provided by Ivy and Company, the proposed bluff setback line will provide for a 60 to 75-foot setback from the top of the bluff. Staff finds this proposal to be reasonable and meet the intent of the bluff setback. However, staff recommends that the petitioner be required to provide a soil stability analysis to planning and building safety divisions for review and approval to ensure that the soils are stable enough to support the home addition proposed. And that is the one and only condition of approval on this plat that we're recommending. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Mr. Edmondson and then Mr. Kinch.
Through the chair, do you know where the bluff setback extends on the lots that are on the cul-de-sac there of Bluff Creek Circle? I see the we have the plat that shows the bluff setback that essentially runs, I think, southeast, but I don't see where it runs to the north. I don't see the plat where it would show where that bluff setbacks line is on the lots that are on Bluff Creek Circle.
Through the chair, Mr. Edmondson, I don't have that information for you. Perhaps that's a question that may be directed to the petitioner's representative.
Okay, additionally, I see a plat note here that talks, it's plat note, I believe 2 here, that says portions of the area encompassed by this plat are located within areas classified as having moderate ground failure susceptibility zone 3 and high ground failure susceptibility zone 4 by the municipality of Anchorage Geotechnical Hazard Assessment Report dated June 15th, 1979, prepared by Harding Lawson and Associates. Has that report been reviewed by staff?
It has not. Through the chair, Mr. Edmondson, it has not been reviewed by staff. Part of the reason why staff is recommending this soil stability analysis is because we have concern over the stability of that area for which the proposed addition would be going.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kinch.
Thank you. Really quick question. Do you believe that this study will suffice the building safety's comments about any realignment of bluff setback line should undergo the same level of professional scrutiny that was used to establish it?
Through the chair, Mr. Kinch, it was at the suggestion of building safety that we add that condition, so yes, I do believe so.
Thank you.
Mr. Edmondson.
Actually, through the chair, I'm sorry, I have one more question. And I don't have an aerial here that shows this, what I'm going to ask you, so I'm hoping you have some additional information. But the bluff setback line that runs to the south, that's shown on the plats that are in our packet, particularly as it runs through tract, I believe it's I-2. Do you know if that bluff setback runs along the top of the bluff through that area. Page 14, I'm sorry.
Through the chair, Mr. Edmondson, I believe the bluff setback line, or the property that you're referring to is on page 45, the plat on page 45. If I'm sorry, these are 8.5 by 11s, and it's kind of hard to read, but it does appear that there is a tract I-2 that has a 50-foot bluff setback.
Yeah, correct. That's the line I'm talking about. Do you know if that if that bluff setback line runs along the top of the ridge of the bluff?
As far as I know, yes. It appears to, and if you look at aerial photography, and perhaps Mr. Ivy can provide you some documentation, the bluff setback line seems to follow the top of the bluff to a point where lots 9 and 10, and then it basically jogs to the right, no longer following that bluff, the top of the bluff. So it does appear to follow the top of the bluff until lots 9 and 10.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions of staff? Public hearing is now open. Would the petitioner's representative please step forward? State your name, spell your last name, and let us know if you'd like to reserve some time for rebuttal.
Don't think I'll need it. Thanks.
Okay.
My name's Mark Ivy, architect, representing the owner on this project. The year or so ago, we were presented with the challenge of doing 3 primary program corrections to the house. One was a major facelift that involved the entire exterior perimeter. The second was a family room addition that was to replace the current family room, which was going to be converted to a sunroom addition, that we could increase the glazing to the southwest so that the owner could enjoy more winter sun. That presented a challenge because of our rear yard setback and our challenges with lot area. We were limited by how far we could go out, which meant we had to involve the existing structure, and in doing so we had to remove pretty much the entire southwest bearing wall. Through this process, we were able to try to stay within the lot coverage limitations, but we also needed to re-support that structure that we removed. And so the concept was to put a brace frame or a moment frame out beyond the structure that was non-conditioned space and project a cantilevered beam in to re-support the 2-story structure. Came up with a concept. We brought it to the zoning department, which then our conversation pretty much was lot coverage. Then we moved to the planning department and spoke to Ms. Iverson and had a dialogue about what set this bluff setback, why the trajectory changed. And there wasn't a real definitive answer. And we looked at the vegetation on the current bluff. It was still mature, so we were suspect there might be a fill site there that caused that line to be established early on. Didn't appear to be that, so we opted to go ahead and submit the project. We knew there was going to be a comment, so then we started the process. So here we are. So all the research we've done, we haven't, like I said, we've looked at the site, we've looked at the vegetation, doesn't appear to be a fill site. The fact is that with our 6-foot projection into the existing 50-foot bluff setback, we're still 99 feet from the beginning of the slope. And when we project the lines, it's still, from the toe of the slope to our addition, it's a 3.2 to 1 grade, which is far in excess or flatter than the 1-to-1 requirements on other projects I've dealt with on bluff sites. If you just look at the slope itself, 99 feet away, it's 1.6 to 1 slope, which is still inside the 1-to-1 requirements that I've dealt with in the past. If you look at the aerial photos from the adjacent structures, even with our 6-foot projection, we're still probably 15 feet inboard of the actual bluff line from all the adjacent properties. And then in response to the private development concerns, comment concerns, we're not even close to disturbing any vegetation that's on the bluff or any erosion control and that kind of thing. As far as bluff failure, I was here in 1964. Quake, I can't say I was focused on that as a young child, but through all my professional experience, I've not heard of any bluff failures along that area, especially when you're this far back. So again, we're only looking for 6 feet from an obvious, change in trajectory from this line, but we opted to kind of parallel the line, so it kind of made it more consistent with the balance of the development. I agree with staff's take on the project. I'm a little curious why we would need to do a slope stability when we're not even close to being, close to the bluff like some of the adjacent properties are. So hope you agree with this logic, and thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the petitioner's representative? Thank you. Mr. Ivey, you have 5 minutes and 17 seconds left for rebuttal. Is there anybody from the public wishing to testify? Oh, excuse me. I did ask. Are there any questions for Mr. Ivey? I did. Is there anybody from the public wishing to testify? Anybody at all? Mr. Ivey, would you like to use any of your time for rebuttal? With hearing and seeing nobody from the public and Mr. Ivey not wishing to use any of his time for rebuttal, the public hearing portion of this is closed, and the matter now rests with the board. May I have a positive motion from the board in the case of S11951-1, Discovery Heights Phase 2 subdivision? Mr. Edmondson.
Yeah, through the chair. I actually have one more question for staff. Is it out of order for me to ask that at this point?
No, I will allow it.
I'm a little unsure about what you're asking for the petitioner to provide here in your recommendations. It says provide the Planning and Building Safety Division a slope stability analysis for review and approval. Could you elaborate on what that is for me a little bit?
Well, through the chair, Mr. Edmondson, this is a suggestion that that the Building Safety Department had asked that I put on this particular action to. Unfortunately, I can't go into detail as to what that analysis would entail. As I understand it, Mr. Ivey is familiar with that analysis, as is the Building Safety Division. It's something that they see on a semi-regular basis. I don't know exactly what goes into that, unfortunately. I apologize.
Well, my only problem with the recommendation is that it's unclear to me, and it sounds like it's unclear to staff, which may mean it's unclear to the petitioner what he has to do to meet this condition. So that's what worries me a bit about the recommendation as it's written.
Thank you. I have a question of staff. Does the Geotechnical Advisory Commission still exist?
Yes, the Geotechnical Advisory Commission does still exist, and perhaps this particular case should have gone to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission. That is an option for us here.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of staff? Mr. Fuller.
Yes, through the chair. In this particular instance, they're not building in any closer to the bluff. They're just looking for the movement of the easement line?
Through the chair, Mr. Fuller, they are in fact building into the existing 50-foot building setback line, hence the need to move that line. They wouldn't be permitted to construct their proposed addition within that setback. So in order to construct the addition, they'll need to move the line to get the building permit.
Okay, then on page 13, where it shows the contour lines, does not appear to be any change in the contour or the elevation of that lot, even far beyond the proposed line. Is that true?
Through the chair, this is correct. The reason why the condition to provide the stability analysis was placed on this particular case is because it's staff's understanding that bluff setback line was placed there for a reason. And in order to ensure that the slope is stable enough to support an addition, we feel that the slope stability analysis is in fact necessary.
I'd like to have a positive motion in this matter for approval, and then we can speak to the motion and we can ask questions of staff. So everybody still have the opportunity to ask more questions. And you could even ask the petitioner's representative back and ask questions of him as well. Ms. Moses and Mr. Fuller seconds. Ms. Moses, will you speak to your motion, please?
In the case S-11951-1, Discovery Heights Phase 2 Subdivision Block 4, Lots 8 and 9, request for the modification of restrictive plat note, which states the areas lying southerly of the bluff setback are intended as yard area. In this yard area, principal buildings are prohibited. Bluff slope vegetation shall not be disturbed except for erosion prevention measures and vegetation enhancement. I move for approval subject to conditions 1 as noted on page 4 of the packet.
Excuse me. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Ms. Moses.
Through the chair, before, and correct me if this isn't the proper way to follow through with this, but before I speak to my motion, I do have a question regarding the Geotechnical Advisory Commission that you noted.
Yes, go ahead.
So, being unfamiliar with that commission, but based on the name, I presume that it strictly serves as an advisory board to the planning department, or maybe staff could speak specifically on the process for which that commission.
Through the chair, Ms. Moses, unfortunately, I don't serve as staff to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission. However, the commission actually does, the planning department does serve as staff. It's actually staffed by planner Dave Tremont. I believe they meet once a month, and they make recommendations on things such as this.
Ms. Moses, I've served on that commission, and the commission is typically made up of engineers. I was an exception as a professional geologist, but they are structural and geotechnical engineers who do exactly what's being requested here by the building safety, and an engineering report would come in front of them, would be presented to them, and they would make a determination and whether it's safe to move the setback or if it should remain the same. And in my opinion, I think those are the experts who should be making the decision on whether to move this line back or not us. From my experience working on these slopes, not exactly this specific slope, but working on these bluffs, I found that during the 1964 earthquake there was massive movement along much of the bluffs, not devastating and not massive failures, but there were mass areas that moved. And I've also found the bluff was not stable in 1952 and 1958. There were years that parts of the bluff failed, but in 64 the entire bluff moved in the area that I was studying. And the process is one of the groundwater, one of the sedimentology and stratigraphy underneath the site, how that interacts with the water, the soil types, and so it does take a geotechnical engineer to really draw that line and say what is safe. So that's my experience, and that's going to be my recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and staff.
One more thing I'd like to add is when I did the study back in the 1980s, the municipality was sued for causing the bluff failure just for some drainage issues. And so in a case like this where a house is being moved out over that line, a family is being at risk, the municipality is also going to be potentially at risk if we approve this without any technical background. Okay, would you speak to your motion, please?
Yes. I do not intend to support my motion based, the reason I do not intend to support my motion is based on my new familiarity with the existence of a advisory commission that is in existence, that per our board chairman has the expertise to seemingly meet the condition that was set forth as part of the staff recommendation to begin with. I do agree with our chairman that it would be inappropriate for this board, in my opinion, to proceed with with a decision on a request of this kind.
Thank you. Mr. Whitfield.
Through the chair, may I make one suggestion? This is completely up to the board, but what we could possibly do in this situation is approve the request to modify the building step, or the bluff setback line subject to approval by the Geotechnical Advisory Commission. So we could essentially remove building safety and planning from the decision-making process and defer to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission. It's up to the board, though.
Thank you. I agree. One other possibility is that we could, several other possibilities. One is we could recommend a postponement and allow a geotechnical study to be done, or we can, if we vote against this tonight, then this is final and it will have to be appealed. I think, just my opinion, we're better off recommending or requiring the Geotechnical Advisory Commission review this and offer their opinion, and then it could come back to us, but we'll have to modify the motion for that. Yeah, thank you. It would be a postponement pending the Geotechnical Commission's advice. I can offer the amendment, and you can accept it, or you can withdraw your motion and have a new motion. Which would you like?
Through the chair, I withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank you. And may I have a new motion? Yes, we can. We're going to, okay, we'll pause. May I have a new motion, please? Ms. Moses.
In the case S-11951-1, Discovery Heights, Phase 2, Subdivision Block 4, Lots 8 and 9. I move for a postponement of this case, subject to, or to allow for, a geotechnical evaluation and review by the Geotechnical Advisory Commission.
Thank you. And Mr. Fuller, do you second this? Will you speak to your motion, please?
Just going back to earlier comments that my finding out this commission exists and the circumstances for which this request comes before this board, certainly it would be best served to postpone.
Thank you. Is there any discussion, any additional discussion or questions? Mr. Edmondson.
I just, probably a discussion and a question through the chair. Why? I'm just curious of why we need to postpone this matter when we could make it a condition that the Geotechnical Advisory Commission approve the request of the petitioner.
Mr. Edmondson, good question. It's up to the board to decide. If we postpone this and it goes to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission, it will come back to us and we will learn of the results. If we pass this conditionally that it goes to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission and we don't postpone it, then we don't see the results. So it's up to the board to choose. Mr. Cole.
That was, I guess the only comment that I was going to have is that we haven't heard from the petitioner. I mean, I know this is our responsibility, but do we have any obligation to ask him on this? I mean, because we are changing things a little bit.
At this point, the matter rests with the board, so it's up to us. You can, if you wish to ask questions of the petitioner, you're allowed to, and I will allow that. Ms. Moses?
Through the chair, and as a matter of discussion on this motion and in response to your question, I feel a postponement is the proper mechanism to or proper decision in proceeding, unless I misunderstand. But two things: moving this setback affects more than one lot, of which the petitioner, or affects two lots, not just the one where the residence is having structural changes. But secondly, maybe a question for the chair or staff on that note. The Geotechnical Advisory Commission, although they'll review it and come up with a yay or nay position, do they ultimately make the decision, or is that information just provided to planning?
I can answer that. What we are requiring and what building safety is asking for is that an independent geotechnical investigation be conducted by the landowner to determine the safety of moving that line and if it's appropriate to move that line or not, and that engineering firm or engineer could look at the proposed loads from the new building. Then what we are now requesting with your motion is that that information be presented to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission. They will give it a review, and they will either recommend that they agree with the findings of that independent engineer or they disagree. And so then an ultimate decision has to be made either by us as if we have a postponement, or by building safety and staff if we don't have a postponement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with the addition of that information, and I'm appreciative of that, I further intend to support the motion to postpone. There's a homeowners association involved that made comment, and I think this postponement will provide the mechanism for public input, again, based on the geotechnical evaluation findings and review.
Thank you. Mr. Kinge.
Through the chair, as much as I don't like to make things as onerous on a homeowner as possible, considering the 2 letters of support we received from not only the homeowner but the neighbor in this case, I do feel that this warrants some further investigation. I believe that a comment from the homeowners association and the study at a minimum, but if there's some way that we could make this as simple as possible for the petitioner, I would be in support of that. So I defer to my colleagues.
Thank you. Mr. Cole. Okay. My understanding, and staff correct me or if I'm wrong, is as the motion is on the floor right now, the motion would require the homeowner to engage a professional engineer to do an evaluation of the setback and provide and present those results to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission. The way the motion sets is once the Geotechnical Advisory Commission approves or disapproves that, then the case comes back before the Platting Board, before us, and we decide whether to approve it or not. That's the way it is right now. Yes.
I just want to point out that the public hearing is closed. You have asked for additional information from the Geotechnical Advisory Commission. However, you would not be able to take in additional public comments after that information is provided because you've already closed the public hearing.
So could we reopen the public hearing?
You closed the public hearing. You've got a motion to postpone. You could. We haven't gotten far enough. I think you could. I think you could, amend your postponement to postpone pending information, and when that information's returned, reschedule the public and reopen the public hearing. So you do both. You reschedule it and reopen it.
So
because
that
you'd have to give a new notice as well.
Okay, so that would require a modification of the motion.
An amendment.
Or amendment to the motion.
I withdraw my second.
Okay. Okay, so
You're withdrawing your second so that Jody may modify her motion as it exists. As I noted.
Yes, through the chair, but question for staff, and to answer, or, to kind of further to Mr. Cole's question too. So if I amend the motion to reschedule and reopen the public hearing, then what does that require then the petitioner to go back, post notice, and kind of start from the beginning, if you will? What's the burden, I guess?
Clarify for me, David, if I'm incorrect, but the signs are already posted on the property with a case number. It doesn't necessarily have a date on it that I'm aware of. They're just posted. What would happen is that we would do one of two things. We could send out a postponement, or we could send out a notice of a rehearing once we've got the date determined. Or we could do both. And then we would just come back and start again.
Mr. Whitfield.
If I may make a suggestion to keep things as simple as possible, I would make a suggestion to amend the condition of approval to essentially defer to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission, unless the board believes that they want the petitioner to come back for a second approval from the Platting Board. You could recommend approval of the action subject to approval by the Geotechnical Advisory Commission. If you want to keep it simple, I think that that's the most appropriate way to go about it.
Thank you.
Through the chair. So are we still in discussion?
We don't have a second on the motion. And so you have a motion without a second. I can ask for a second, or I can allow you to modify the motion or withdraw the motion to start over.
The motion would fail for lack of second, and we would have to move on to something else, a different motion.
How about
Or withdraw.
do you wish to modify your motion?
We can take a break to think about
Would you like to take a 10-minute break?
No, that's okay. So So I would like to amend my motion to I amend the motion to postpone or reschedule the case and reopen the public hearing after a geotechnical evaluation and review by the Geotechnical Advisory Commission.
Thank you. May I have a second, please? Well, we don't have a second, so that,
I don't know what you do.
one moment. And Mr. Fuller, do you second with the amendment? No.
So we're clarifying, there's no second to Ms. Moses' motion, so that motion fails.
So that motion fails for lack of second. So yes, you may make a motion. First off, Mr. Cole, yes, you may make a motion, but wait one, please.
I think I'll try this. I think we've
Okay.
kind of worked around this one in case S11951-1. Discovery Heights Phase 2 Subdivision Block 4, Lots 8 and 9. I move to approve the proposed modification of the 50-foot bluff setback line for Discovery Heights Phase 2 Subdivision Block 4, Lots 8 and 9, subject to a geotechnical review and approval of the Geotechnical Reviewing Commission, and providing that to Planning and Building Safety Divisions a soil stability analysis for review and approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Fuller seconds that. Is there discussion? Mr. Kange, would you speak to your motion, please?
Thank you, through the chair. Based on all the comments and testimony from the petitioner's representative, the petitioner themselves through their comments, staff comments, and the report, I tend to vote in favor of this motion, as I believe it's the least onerous thing we can do to satisfy the requirements and meet the needs of the petitioner.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, did you have a comment?
I intend to support the motion because it's an area that is out of my expertise, but it seems like it should be addressed, and at the same time, I don't need to vote on this a second time. I think the petitioner should be allowed to do what he has to, and if he gets the approval from that advisory committee, then he should be able to move forward.
Thank you. And Ms. Moses, did you have a comment?
Through the chair, I do not intend to vote in favor of this motion. In my opinion, it's not about coming back before the board for this board for review and approval. It's about allowing reviewing agencies and the public to make comment based on new information. So in my opinion, and the primary reason I do not intend to support this motion is I don't think the condition meets the burden to allow for those reviewing agencies, as well as, for example, the homeowners association and other residents in the neighborhood to review that new information and come before this board or to participate in the public public comment.
Thank you. Mr. Edmondson.
I hate to ask this, but could we repeat the motion, please?
Yes?
Well, I think what was stated is that approval,
I wouldn't be able to read it exactly, but basically it was pending, it was subject to review and approval of the Geotechnical Commission and also approval of
providing to the Planning and Building Safety Division a soil stability analysis for review and approval.
Okay, is that clear? We should get it right.
So the way that I understand it, essentially we are the motion requires, as it's outlined in the staff packet, providing the Planning and Building Safety Division a soil stability analysis for review and approval, and approval by the Geotechnical Commission.
That's the Geotechnical Advisory Commission.
Advisory
Yes.
Commission, I'm sorry.
Yes. That is the motion, as I understand it. And that's what we have.
So, to clarify, the motion would allow the Building Safety Division the ability to approve the soil stability analysis that I'm assuming would also go to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission.
It's my understanding that both the Building Safety and the Geotechnical Advisory Commission would have an opportunity to approve or disapprove of the study that's going to be conducted, the independent study.
And it would take both of those approvals to get the modification changed.
That's the way the motion is presented right now.
And through the chair, just for clarification, that was my intent because I believe once this soil stability analysis is done, somebody like the Geotechnical Advisory Commission can interpret that much better than I can and offer an approval at that point.
Okay. All right. I just want to comment on the motion then, since I've got some clarity here, that I intend to approve the motion. I think that it does two things. It allows the experts to weigh in on this request, and it does give staff another opportunity to review and approve the request as well. So one concern I have is if the Geotechnical Commission approves the request and yet building safety for some reason would not, that's a concern I would have, because I think the experts would be the Geotechnical Advisory Commission. But I do think that I would assume that building safety would weigh that heavily in their decision to approve the request as well. So I do intend to approve the motion as it's on the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Kange. Is there any?
I withdraw my request. That was just for the clarification.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, there is opposition, so we'll vote. A yes vote is a positive, directing the petitioner to get a geotechnical evaluation and present this to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission as well as the building safety. And a no vote is opposed to that, is opposed to the motion. Thank you. And the motion passes. Thank you. Would anybody like a break before we go to the next case? excuse me, before we discuss. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the Board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Planning Division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made, and the hearing and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503, or an appeal of the Board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. Would the Board like to take a 10-minute recess or continue on with the next case? We're going forward. Okay. The next case is S11952-1, Eagle Point Phase 9. And may we have staff's presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a preliminary plat. This preliminary plat is a request for subdivision of 1 tract into 10 tracts and 86 lots with variances from AMC 2180-240, cul-de-sac length, AMC 2185 Table A, minimum standards for streets, AMC 2185-010A, general requirements, and AMC 2180-300D, lot width to depth ratio. Petition site is located in Eagle River, north of Eagle River Loop Road. Access to the site is from Eagle River Loop Road through Yosemite Drive. The proposed lots are zoned R1 SL, Single Family Residential District, with special limitations by AO 93-159. Special limitations for this development restrict the maximum number of dwelling units to 320. With this proposed subdivision, a total of 266 lots will be created, or will have been created. Access to the site is from a 50-foot right-of-way known as Yellowstone Drive to the west. The petitioner is required to construct to municipal standards 33-foot wide paved street, back of curb to back of curb, including type 2 rolled curb and gutter with 4-foot wide concrete sidewalks. The 4-foot wide sidewalks will be required on both sides of the street for Tyndall Drive, Tyndall Circle, and Yellowstone Drive. Sidewalks on one side of the street will be required for Vanderleer Way and Langley Circle. Petitioner intends to serve the subdivision with water by a 16-inch main that currently runs to the property within an easement as depicted on the plat. Sewer will be served by a lift station and a forced main that will access the existing sewer main within Shasta Circle. A mainline extension agreement with AWU will be required for the extension of public water and sanitary sewer. The existing codes, covenants, and restrictions for this subdivision will need to be amended to include the lots created by this plat. The petitioner shall provide a revised copy of the Homeowners Association documents to current planning to include those respective lots. Eagle Point subdivision largely conforms to the goals, strategies, and objectives of the Eagle River, Chugach Eagle River Comprehensive Plan. It meets the desired residential density of 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre for the area. At full build-out, Eagle Point will have a density of 3 dwelling units per acre. This development appears to ensure that natural systems are protected, maintained, and enhanced. There is a 20-foot vegetative setback along the bluff that abuts the Eagle River Greenbelt. There are several variances being requested with this subdivision. As you're aware, there are 4 standards required for granting a variance. I'll go through the 4 standards, and please forgive me for being a bit long-winded on this. We've got several variances to go through with each standard. Variances are being requested for from AMC 2180-240, AMC 2185 Table A, AMC 2185-010A, and 2180-300D. Standard number 1, staff finds this staff finds this standard to be met for the requested variances. Eagle Point subdivision has been planned and developed thus far with a proposed 50-foot right-of-way width. This width provides for the necessary public improvements associated with an urban development. The petitioner with his platting action will be required to provide 5-foot snow storage easements along the frontage of all lots within this subdivision. It would be unreasonable and undesirable to change the design standards at this point in developing this subdivision. Proposed lots 25 through 31 are affected by topography. In addition, the design and location of Yellowstone Drive makes it impractical to comply fully with the subdivision regulations. This subdivision is unique in that it is bordered by steep bluffs to the north and east boundaries and presently has only one means of ingress-egress. However, with this subdivision, the petitioner is providing for a future secondary access to the south at the southern end of Tyndall Circle. Standard number 2, staff finds this standard to be met for the requested variances. As was stated in standard number 1, this subdivision was designed with a 50-foot right-of-way and provides for all necessary improvements required in urban areas. The granting of this variance would not be detrimental to public welfare and would allow the petitioner to continue construction of the roadway as it was originally planned and approved. The granting of this variance would not be AMC 2180-300D lot width depth ratio for lots 25 through 31. The granting of this variance would not be detrimental to the public welfare. The existing topography and design of Yellowstone Drive have dictated the shape of those lots. AMC 2180-240 cul-de-sac length. It doesn't appear that granting this variance would be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property in the area. This variance will not adversely impact, will not have an impact to adjacent property. The need for this variance is driven by topography and the surrounding Eagle River Greenbelt. Standard number 3, staff finds this standard to be met for all requested variances. AMC 2180 or 85 Table A and AMC 2185-010A revolve around the 50-foot right-of-way dedication. This variance will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations. Granting this variance will allow the petitioner to continue development of the subdivision as was previously approved by the Platting Board. While the proposed 50-foot right-of-way dedication is less than the minimum 60 feet required by the subdivision regulations, all public improvements can and will be achieved. 2180-300D lot width to depth ratio for lots 25 through 31. There's considerable topography differences on the property, and the topography does drive some of the subdivision design, so staff finds that standard to be met. 2180-240 cul-de-sac length. This standard will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations. There are no other conforming alternatives to this variance. The subdivision was in addition to that, the subdivision was previously approved by the Platting Board. Standard number 4, staff finds this standard to be met for all requested variances. AMC 2185 Table A, AMC 2185-010, the 50-foot right-of-way dedication. Undue hardship would result from strict compliance with the subdivision regulations. This subdivision had previously been approved by the Platting Board with relatively the same design. A large portion of the subdivision has been completed, and denial of this variance appears to be unreasonable. AMC 2180-300D lot width to depth ratio for lots 25 through 31. As was stated previously, the topography has largely dictated the design of this subdivision. The shapes of these lots are determined by the location of Yellowstone Drive and the southern boundary of the property. Thus, undue hardship would result from strict compliance. AMC 2180-240 cul-de-sac length. Undue hardship would result from strict compliance with the subdivision regulations, as there are no conforming alternatives available currently. The surrounding topography and park ownership make this variance warranted. That being said, staff would like to recommend approval of the phasing plan, approval of the variance from 2180-300D lot width to depth ratio for lots 25 through 31, approval of the variance from AMC 2185 Table A, minimum street standards, and AMC 2185-010A, general requirements to allow a 50-foot right-of-way, subject to providing a 5-foot snow storage easement along the frontage of all lots. Approval of the variance from AMC 2180-240 cul-de-sac length to allow cul-de-sacs to exceed the maximum 600 feet in urban areas, and approval of the plat for 60 months, subject to standards 1 through 18 on pages 13, 14, and 15 on your staff packet, with one slight change. If I may direct your attention to condition number 6. Condition number 6 states that the petitioner must carry over plat note number 1 from plat 2005-85 that states, quote, there is a 30-foot building setback from the top of the bluff line. I would like to include in that plat note that construction of decks on sonotube foundations within the 30-foot building setback up to the 20-foot vegetative easement are permitted, end quote. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Hearing and seeing none, we're going to open the public hearing. Will the petitioner's representative please step forward, state your name, spell your last name, and let us know if you'd like to reserve time for rebuttal.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, planning staff, and concerned members of the public. My name is Tom Dreyer, and last name is spelled like the ice cream, D-R-E-Y-E-R. With me tonight I have Joe Vicente, the developer, and Mr. Dave Grenier with Triad Engineering to answer any of your engineering technical type questions. This request before you tonight is basically exactly the same as what was approved by the Platting Board in 1998 and then again in year 2002. And between 2002 and 2010 there were several time extensions granted, and due to the economy hitting, things got slowed down a little bit, so we didn't quite make it through all the different phases, and that's why we're back in front of you here tonight. If any of you have been through that subdivision, it's a very beautiful subdivision. The developer always adds things to it, has extra landscaping, has extra bike paths, and it's really nice. And that stuff actually works out very well for the city too, because his lots, by the time they're valued, they may have as much as like 20 to 25% of a higher tax value, which is good for the city. We agree with all of the conditions as stated by staff. We'd like to thank staff for their thorough review. I'd like to make a few minor additions, and that's on your page 13, E4. Add to the end there the area, the words, the area may be disturbed to install utilities and other improvements that may have to cross the easement. It's just to help clarify that, you know, sometimes we have a storm drainage system that may have to cross the easement or a sewer line or whatnot, just to make sure there's no problems later. That we agree with the amendment that staff came up with on condition E6. That has been approved before by the Platting Board back in 1999, I think it was. And on E7, just to keep away from any situations, we'd like to add in between the word dedicating and any, have dedicated on track 6, coincident with the water easement, comma, the necessary pedestrian trail easements as required by the non-motorized transportation coordinator. with that, I'd like, reserve the 5 minutes, excuse me, for that, and,
You have 7 minutes and 2 seconds for rebuttal.
okay, great. All right, with that, I'll leave myself open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the petitioner's representative? I have one. On item number 7, could you read that again so we have a clear record of?
So it would read, dedicating on track 6, coincident with the water easement, a pedestrian trail easement as required by. The water easement there was actually put over the, okay.
Just for clarification, you had finished that with required by the non-motorized trail coordinator, is that correct?
The non-motorized, oh, yeah, I guess that would be trail. It says transportation on here, but it'd be the trails coordinator.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the petitioner? Mr.
And just
Cole?
for, excuse me, just for backing back up on that, we had talked with the trails coordinator, and the utility easement there was originally put over the top of where the existing trail is.
Thank you. Mr. Cole and then Mr. Edmondson.
And I apologize because I'm probably staring right at this, but in some of the comments I saw dissatisfaction with the extension of Shasta.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that where that is, so I'm a little bit confused by it.
Shasta is not going to be changed or extended. I think that was a miscommunication somewhere along the line when somebody was reading it was a rumor. But Shasta Circle is not actually even a part of our plat.
It's going to be part of it because there's a lot of comments about that. I just was curious.
Yeah.
So it's not.
No, it's not going to be. It's just a rumor.
Just for clarification through the chair, is Yellowstone the road that high school and the school district came in about 4 months ago and tried to change and told them to build the road or do what they said they were going to do? Is that the same road?
I believe it is.
Through staff?
Through the chair, Mr. Cole, that's Yosemite Drive. Yosemite Drive runs north-south. Yellowstone Drive basically connects to Yosemite and runs east-west.
I got you. Okay.
Mr. Edmondson.
Through the chair, Mr. Dreyer, could you reiterate the changes to condition E4 as well?
Sure. So what's written there would stay the same, and then it'd be added after the word easement. The area may be disturbed to install utilities and other improvements that may have to cross the easement. It's just to help to make sure we don't have any problems later on that. Even though it's understood, it's good to clarify it.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, did you have another question? Mr. Edmondson, did you have another question?
No, I'm sorry, thanks.
And are there any other questions of the petitioner's representative or the petitioner? Thank you. You have 7 minutes for rebuttal, and we'll now allow public testimony.
Thank you.
Are you wishing to testify? Please step forward. State your name for the record.
Good evening. My name's Carl Von Lerty. That's Karlvonluhrte.
I'll be representing the South Fork Community Council and requesting 5 minutes of the board's time.
Okay.
Before I get started, if I could hand out some over our satellite imagery to help the discussion with the orientation.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Would you mind respelling your last name for the record, please?
Certainly. VON space LUHRTE.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, we appreciate your time and your service. The South Fork Community Council would first like to commend the developer, Mr. Vicente, on his vision for Eagle Point and the development to date. We also concur with the vast majority of the proposed plat. However, there were several concerns which were raised in our meeting in September, specifically the 6th of September, that members of the community expressed, and they all fall under pretty much the safety umbrella. As it pertains to vehicle traffic, if you reference the attachment, and again, based on my experience, as well as a lot of those in the Community Council, including members that serve on the Subursa Road Board and are familiar with planning, whatever you can do to minimize backing up, specifically with large vehicles, definitely improves public safety, and that really is the focus of the concern as you look at the overhead satellite imagery here. If there's a provision for a loop near the end of the Phase 9, Phase 10 subdivision, it would allow for a much better flow of large vehicles, specifically school buses, large snow clearing equipment, moving vehicles coming into or out of the subdivision, moving families into or out of the subdivision down in that area, as well as emergency service vehicles, first responders, and any type of natural disasters. This is the primary safety concerns which people have raised. As you can see from the overhead satellite imagery, this is the way it currently looks. What you're looking at the very top of the photo, if you put the double lane road at the very top, that's Eagle River Loop Road. And where you see the houses built on the top of the bluff, that is what was referred to earlier as Shasta. So that's the end of Shasta in the current subdivision. As the road curls around to the bottom, you see where the large earth-moving vehicles created a loop at the base of Shasta there. And the reason, of course, is that's very easy for large vehicles to flow through. And what we're asking for is, instead of a series of cul-de-sacs, as are currently proposed, going north, where that loop would get closed off and homes built, is to, at the very end or close to the end, create a loop where vehicles could continuously flow instead of having to go into these cul-de-sacs and then back up. Does that make sense? Or anyway, that's the primary thing we're asking for. And of course, we're asking for that to be part of a prerequisite for the Phase 9 construction, not something to be post-Phase 9 or pushed into Phase 10. That's really all I have to say, although they raised several other concerns. Most of them have been addressed or in the comments. There was concerns over the second entry and exit into the subdivision, but talking to Eklutna, who owns the property for that, they're not looking to do that for another 15, 20 years. So for the meantime, we're definitely looking at the only way in and out is through Yosemite, then onto Yellowstone Drive. That's really all I have. I'll stop there and answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I see none. Thank you.
I actually have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Edmondson. Go ahead.
Through the chair, I'm not clear what what you were describing as the loop that you wanted to see on here. Could you show me on this drawing?
We can turn it on.
Upper? This is the extension, as you come in here, of Yellowstone Drive that would continue down to the bottom of the road. As it's laid out currently, as you proceed back to the north, this would be turned into a cul-de-sac, one-way in cul-de-sac. There would be development along here, where essentially this would be cut off, and this would be another cul-de-sac here. So what we're requesting right now, you cannot get school bus access, for example, or large vehicle or snow removal vehicles onto Shasta because of the small turnaround in the cul-de-sac there. So without a loop at the bottom, there wouldn't be a way without backing up for large vehicles to smoothly flow into and out of this area down here, which is why we're asking for a loop. The only loop within the entire Eagle Point subdivision is if you go up Acadia and then over and around Lassen.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to testify? Please step forward. State your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Gary Agron, A-G-R-O-N. First, I'd like to thank the Platting Board for the opportunity to comment on the subdividing question. Second, I want to say that I am pro-development as long as it's responsible development and does not put our families and children into high-risk environment. I would ask us, through the chairman, if they've received comments that were made on the 2nd and 3rd of October. These are recent additions to comments that were made online from my wife and myself. Now, I'm a lifelong Anchorage resident and just finished 31 years of military service, culminating duty here at Fort Richardson. And, you know, I do echo the same comments as Carl's, that applaud the developer and the builders for the high-quality homes that are currently in existence, the unique high-quality homes. But there are some problems in the new tracking that we call for. You know, during those 31 years of service, one of the things that we train our leaders is make sure before you make a decision to walk the ground. Make sure you understand what you're getting to so you can see where the best protection areas are, where there are areas of risk, to risk of the mission, more importantly, risk to our soldiers and our men and women. So those that followed that example, they lived. Those that did not walk the ground, they had problems and we had casualties. Today, you have some documents in front of you that were stamped no comment, no objection from various agencies. And I would imagine that their offices with stacks of papers and studies and visitors didn't have that opportunity to walk the ground. And so I ask this board to take the time to walk the ground before rendering a decision that may have unconscionable repercussions in the following years. Now, you have in your packet some comments that were made as well as from my wife and myself. One of them addressed what Mr. Von Lerty just talked about in terms of buses. Now buses can't go ahead and safely go into this new track where new homes are, and so buses have to stay at the very top, thus making it unsafe for children to walk from that portion of the subdivision up to the only place that there is for a bus stop, which is at Lassen and Yellowstone. So I would ask you to take a look at the comments that we've provided. Use that. I'm going to use them in my old terms as spot reports, some intelligence. You have comments in there. You know, as a soldier, if I had any comments that talk about risk, I looked at those more fairly than any other comments about risk and about lives. In this case, I recommend you take a look at that. So in there, I talk about that I recommend that the commission look at the traffic conditions. There's 5 questions in there that I'd recommend that the board have sufficiently answered prior to the building. Now, I know that staff had just mentioned that the developer has in the plan for an existing second exit for the for there, but I would say let's put they're putting the cart before the horse. So my final comment is walk the ground first before let's doing it. Let's not rubber stamp the comments. Let's walk the ground, be responsible for this, and ensure that the necessary risks are mitigated so the families in this great neighborhood can enjoy rather than mourn their livelihood. Thank you for the comments. I'll have an opportunity to comment.
Are there questions? Thank you very much. There are no questions. Is there anybody else wishing to testify? Anybody at all? Hearing and seeing none, would you like to, Mr. Dreyer, would you like to use your time for rebuttal?
Okay. Thank you. I'll address the public comments. For one, there's hundreds of cul-de-sacs designed all over the town, and they seem to work pretty well. A lot of people prefer cul-de-sacs, a little more quieter, better place to raise your kids without big trucks running around. Our streets are completely MOA, full road design approved. And as far as bus stops go, the proper person to ask would be the Anchorage School District. I've gone through that process before in some other subdivisions we've done where if you want a bus stop in a certain area, then you can petition them and they run it through their design process because they have very set criteria where they would like to have their school bus stops. Dave, would you add anything to this response?
One comment about, my name is Dave Grenier, Triad Engineering, and one comment about cul-de-sacs. They are designed for emergency vehicles, full-size fire trucks, and that's where the design comes from. It's from a health safety standpoint. That's how the size is established. And as Thomas mentioned, these cul-de-sac designs not only meet health safety standards, but they also meet a marketing standpoint of quieter streets, kids, less traffic, slower traffic. And so we feel this type of a design is much more desirable than a loop type of scenario.
And I guess with that, we'll be open to taking any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Edmondson.
Just a quick question through the chair, Mr. Dreyer, Mr. Grenier. I heard a comment that the Shasta cul-de-sac wasn't adequate enough to provide bus turnaround. But that was public comment, and I just heard you two, I think both of you say in different ways that the cul-de-sacs as are designed are adequate for fire vehicles and buses. Is that accurate? Is that what I understood you to say?
The Shasta is built to the municipal standards, which needs to have fire department sign off before it can actually be, the design is approved by the fire department. As Tom has mentioned, the school district has a whole list of criteria where they will have bus stops. Turnaround is one of them, one of many. So I guess to answer your question, it meets all of the fire safety regulations as far as size and turnaround.
Again, I do think there's a condition in the recommendations of staff to resolve with bear with me here. To resolve with to verify that temporary turnaround easements will not be necessary for MOA fire departments in the limits of Bandular Way and Tyndall Circle.
Mm-hmm.
Is that would that be necessary to accommodate this?
Yeah, that's just verifying that at the end of Bandelier, say, you can have 150 feet from the end of the turn or the radius there to the end of a road. That's a fire code. And it'd be the same thing with Tyndall. You'd have to have 150 feet maximum from the, say, like where a curb line would be extended in a cul-de-sac to the end of the paved section of the road.
So
we might have to provide temporary turnarounds there.
right. So I guess that's my question.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume this will be, since it's a plat note, it'll be something you'll resolve with staff. But
Correct.
is it the intent to put in a temporary turnaround there at the end of Bandelier Way?
At Bandelier, it's only we designed that so it's only a little bit less than 150 feet, so there's not a reason for a temporary turnaround there. The turnaround would be at Humboldt Circle at the end of that, or when
I got you.
Langley Circle is built then also.
All right, thank you.
And I think it's on packet page 35 or 36 where you have approval from the Anchorage School District.
Thank you. Mr. Cole and then Ms. Moses.
Thank you. I'm kind of assuming that a traffic impact analysis was done earlier in the phases and then has been signed off?
Yes. Correct.
And did that anticipate this addition?
Yes, it anticipated the entire development. There's almost no changes on what you see here in what was originally approved in 1999. The phasing's a little bit different, but
So when was it done anyway, just out of
in
curiosity?
1999.
So,
And then again in 2002.
so it's been about 10 years?
Yeah, then it had a time extension, would have been about 2000, somewhere in between there and 2010. So it's been being constructed for the last 14 years under the same plan.
The issue is, did it envision or anticipate this 90 homes with people and traffic? And
Yes.
That's because
Yeah.
when I read a lot of the comments from people, it has to do with the traffic. I mean, it seems almost from the beginning to the end. And I just want to make sure I didn't see a lot in our packet that addressed that. So,
Yeah, I can submit a copy of the original if you'd like to see it. It shows the original design in this area.
sure. And through the chair, can I direct a question to staff?
Yes.
Through the chair, staff, is it common that we have a plan, a traffic analysis that's 10 years old, and is there anything that we as board members should be concerned about here, given the number of comments that we received to this proposal?
Through the chair, Mr. Cole, traffic did submit comments on this platting action, and with those comments did not require a traffic impact analysis. So my assumption would be that they deemed it not necessary at this time and that the previous TIA was sufficient.
Thank you.
Ms. Moses and then Mr. Edmondson.
Through the chair, Mr. Dreyer, can you show me or direct me or comment on page 47, the fire review comments regarding providing a secondary fire apparatus access road?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So on page 47 of the packet, he comments, the recommendation is providing that secondary fire apparatus access road.
Yeah.
So where's
that on?
piece of this meets that recommendation?
Okay.
Yes. So I can make the connection.
Yeah, there's actually two different access points, 3 total in the subdivision. There's the one that comes off of what's called track 7 there on the plat.
So they're not necessarily all
Yeah, it's
three
kind
reflected here.
No, there's one on this particular phase, and then there's another one about right here in the plan, about maybe 1,000 feet to the west, where there's an access point, to the south, to the same big tract of land that Clutna Native Corporation owns. And the one on ours is at the end of Tyndall Circle in the southeast corner of Phase E. That's the only place you can actually access that, because around the perimeter to the west up there around track 5 and all along the north and most of the east, it's a pretty big bluff that goes down into the Eco River basin there. So that the end of Tyndall Circle was the perfect place to provide a connection there. And as far as the code that has been referenced there on page 47, that 2009 IFC Appendix D 107.1 was amended in 2011 by the Anchorage Assembly. It was AO, excuse me, 2011-4S. And I have copies of that here if you'd like to see a copy of that. Approach the board.
No, but he's passing out.
Mr. Edmondson.
Chair, Mr. Dyer, let me see if I can get a little clarity here on the some of the public comments in regards to traffic and the TIA that was discussed. Have there been any changes to the plan in regards to density since this was approved, I guess, in 1998 and in 2002 and again, and then subsequently extended to 2010? Have there been any changes to the plan that would have increased density that would have required the TIA, a new TIA? No, the densities remain the same. It's at the low end. The comprehensive plan in this area is 3 to 6 DUAs, and Eagle Point at full development is running around 3. So it's right on the lower end of the density limitations. Okay, so essentially the plan that's before us tonight is the plan that's been in the works all the way back to 1998. Correct. Okay. It's the same plan. Okay. There's one small change on just that end road alignment in track. The Tyndall, it was just a minor change to fit the topo better for the future access to the south there and Clutna's property.
I have a question. There's
Yes?
public comment about the lack of water pressure in the surrounding community. Can you address the adequacy of the proposed 16-inch water line, or have Mr. Grenier address that?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, yes. There was a comment about water pressure in one house, and The subdivision is served by a 16-inch line through the development, and recently a 24-inch line created a loop that actually created a loop for the water system that ties into Eagle River. The individual, our understanding from AWW is that that's having a water pressure issue is there appears to be a problem in the service line from the street to the house, which is not part of the public system. So there is definitely plenty of water. What the development actually needed was a 12-inch. That was the size that was originally required. AWW requested that the line be upsized to 16 because they were contemplating this connection to the 24. So the amount of water is really not an issue. It's more of an individual service issue, is our understanding from AWW.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any at all? Hearing and seeing none, we're going to close the public testimony. The matter now lies within the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I have a positive motion, please, in the case of S11952 Eagle Point subdivision, phases A, B, C, D, and E, tracks 1 through 10, lots 61A and 62 through 65. So the first motion I'm requesting is for approval of the phasing plan. Mr. Edmondson.
In case S11952-1, Eagle Point, Phase 9, request to subdivide one tract of land into 86 lots and 10 tracts of land with variances. I move to approve the phasing plan as recommended by staff and submitted by the petitioner.
Thank you. And Mr. Kane seconds. Mr. Edmondson, will you speak to your motion, please?
I tend to support my motion. This project's been ongoing for a number of years. It's been before numerous boards, and we're just allowing the petitioner to continue moving forward with the project as initially been approved previously.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Next, I would like a motion for approval of the variance from AMC 21.80.300D lot width to the depth ratio for lots 25 through 31. Mr. Edmondson, thank you.
I'll give this a shot here. In case S11952-1, Eagle Point subdivision, phases A, B, C, D, and E, tracks 1 through 10, lots 61A and 62 through 65, block 1, lots 21 through 35, block 5, lots 1 through 17, and 39 and 90, block 6. I move to approve the variance from AMC 21-80 or 21.80.240 cul-de-sac length.
Mr. Edmondson, what I'm asking for, and I'm sorry, is on page 12, excuse me, number B, for the lot width to depth ratio. Look at on page 12.
Step ahead of myself here.
At the bottom of the page, page 12, item B.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong thing here. Just to amend my motion, modify my motion for approval of the variance from AMC 21.80.300D lot width to depth ratio for lots 25 through 31.
Thank you. Perfect. And Mr. Fuller, do you second? Okay, Mr. Edmondson, please speak to your motion.
I intend to vote in favor of the motion. Feel that the variance as requested has met the conditions as outlined in the staff packet 1 through 4. That the proposed lots 25 through 31 are affected by topography, and in addition, the design and location of Yellowstone Drive makes it impractical to comply fully with the subdivision regulations. And that by granting of this variance would not be detrimental to the public welfare. Existing topography and the design of Yellowstone Drive have dictated the shape of the proposed lots, and that there are considerable topography differences on the property, and that is driving the subdivision design. Also, that the shapes of these lots are determined by the location of Yellowstone Drive and the southern boundary of the property. Thus, undue hardship would result from strict compliance with the subdivision regulations.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition to the motion? I too intend to support this motion in that I do believe it would be impractical to not offer this, as well as I believe that it's been demonstrated tonight that through staff and the staff package on page 10, 11, and 12 that this does meet all the requirements for a variance. So is there any further discussion or opposition? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. I would now like a positive motion for approval of the variance from AMC 21.85 Table A minimum standards for streets and AMC 21.85.010A general requirements to allow 50-foot rights of way subject to providing a 5-foot snow storage easement along the frontage of all lots. Mr. Edmondson. Would you address your motion, please?
Yeah. In case S11952-1 Eagle Point subdivision phases A through E, tracks 1 through 10, lots 61A and 62 through 65, blocks 1, lots 21 through 35, block 5, lots 1 through 17 and 39 through 90, block 6. I move for the approval of the variance from AMC 21.85, Table A minimum standard streets, and AMC 21.85-0.010A general requirements to allow 50-foot rights of way, subject to condition 1, providing a 5-foot snow storage easement along the frontage of all lots.
Thank you. And Mr. Kange, seconds. Mr. Edmondson, would you speak to your motion, please?
I intend to support my motion as outlined in the staff packet, and the request meets the requirements of a variance, of the variance standards. I will note that Eagle Point subdivision has been planned and developed thus far with the proposed 50-foot right-of-way width. This width provides for the necessary public improvements associated with the urban development. Also note that as it's stated in standard number 1, the subdivision was designed with 50-foot right-of-way widths and provides for all necessary public improvements required in urban areas, and that granting this variance would not be detrimental to public welfare and would allow the petitioner to continue the construction of the roadway as it was originally planned and approved in 1998 and again in 2002. This variance will not affect or nullify the intent of the purpose of the subdivision regulations, and that granting of this variance will allow the petitioner to continue to develop this subdivision as previously approved by previous platting boards.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Any additional findings? Any opposition to the motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. I would now like a positive motion for item D on page 13, approval of the variance AMC 21.80.240, the cul-de-sac length. Mr. Kange.
Case S 11952-1. With regard to approval of the variance from AMC 21-80-240 cul-de-sac length, I find that the conditions have been met in the package. Petitioner's testimony has also supported this as his staff testimony. I tend to support this motion.
And I'm sorry? Oh.
I'm sorry, did all that without a second?
Oh.
Let me restate. I move to approve the variance from AMC 21-80-240 cul-de-sac length to allow cul-de-sacs to exceed the maximum 600 feet in the urban areas.
Thank you. And Ms. Moses seconds. And you did speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I tend to vote in favor of my motion. I feel that the variance has met the 4 standards as outlined by staff. Sorry. As presented by the staff in our packets, as determined by petitioners, I did take into consideration public comment and testimony, but I did find that granting this variance would not be detrimental to public welfare in those 4 cases.
Thank you. And Mr. Cole, would you like to discuss this motion?
I'm just going to make a comment.
Okay.
I will probably vote for this, but I do it with some hesitation, and I do it mainly because of several factors. First, we have a number of comments that talk about traffic, and really nothing in the presentation that I saw that addressed it. And that could be one thing, because I understand a little bit of the concern from the people that are voting or that are making their comments. But I'm also a little bit reluctant when the council, the neighborhood council, comes in here and tells us that they have concerns, and that makes me hesitate. At least we don't have any recent traffic analysis in over 10 or 12 years. Vehicles are different. On the other hand, this proposal has been in place for a number of years. I understand the benefits that come from having a cul-de-sac versus having people with loops, and that just may promote people driving faster to get around. And if you have a cul-de-sac, people have to stop and turn around. So I guess I was a little expecting to see a little bit more from the petitioner and the staff addressing this issue of traffic, but I guess it's understandable. My expectations were, because of the number of comments and because we had the council come in here, we would see more of a presentation, but I guess I understand it, so I will probably vote for that, but I thought it was important to state.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or discussion? I am going to support this motion, and I believe that the standards have been met to support this, and the standards as listed on page 10, 11, and 12, specifically the special circumstances, the variance will not be detrimental to the public, and the variance will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations, and lastly, there would be an undue hardship. An undue hardship would result from strict compliance with the specific provisions. And I'm also going to support this based on the testimony of the petitioner that this does meet all of the municipality standards, and that the fire department has approved this, and it will allow the safety of the fire trucks and public safety. So for that, I'm going to support this. Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, this motion passes. And I would now like a positive motion addressing item E on page 13, approval of the plat for 60 months subject to conditions that were listed and potentially amendments that were suggested. Mr. Kange?
I move to approve the plat for 60 months, subject to the conditions outlined on pages 13 through 15. That would be conditions 1 through 18. Making note of the staff's changes to condition 6, and I'll let staff insert the exact wording, but it refers to construction of decks being permitted. I'll let the staff fill in the blanks. And the petitioner's request for conditions 4 and I believe it was 7 to add some language, particularly condition 4, that the area may be disturbed to install utilities. I'll let staff fill in the blanks from there, and condition 7 as well. After dictating on track 6, I'll let staff fill in the exact verbiage as presented by the petitioner. I believe I captured all the changes unless anyone else has anything.
Thank you. Can we read those in so that we have clarity what we're voting on and what the motion is?
Dave, could you please repeat the change you had proposed?
That would be item number 6.
Through the chair, the proposed change to condition number 6 is to state, quote, there is a 30-foot building setback from the top of the bluff line construction of decks on sonotube foundations within the 30-foot building setback up to the 20-foot vegetative easement are permitted only, I suppose. Or we could start that second part with only decks are permitted on sonotube foundations within the 30-foot building setback up to the 20-foot vegetative easement. End quote.
Do you have that in writing so you could give it to Madam Clerk so she could have it?
We have it on the
okay.
on the audio recording, and so that plus the note number 5 as written, and then adding the area may be disturbed to install utilities and other improvements that may need to cross the easement.
That's number 4.
That's number 4. Excuse me. And then on number 7, dedicating on track 6, coincident with the water easement, any necessary pedestrian trail easements as required by the non-motorized transportation coordinator.
Thank you.
Trail coordinator.
Okay, and Ms. Moses seconds. She does. Will you speak, Mr. Keynes, will you speak to your motion, please?
I tend to vote in favor of this motion. Again, I go back to some of the original comments that this plat has been ongoing for some time. It's been approved. I feel that these additions will not only enhance the proposed subdivision, but create create a safer environment based on a lot of these comments, and so I tend to vote in favor of my motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Mr. Cole and then Ms. Moses.
The same comments I made would apply to this section that I made earlier. I would apply to this one.
Thank you. And Ms. Moses.
Through the chair, so I'm leaning toward supporting the motion with a couple of, I guess, a question and a comment. First, I don't see the need for the petitioner's requested change to condition number 4 when it currently says resolving the need for plat notes defining uses and activities. So I understand the petitioners wanting to create ease of verbiage here, but I don't necessarily see the benefit. And then I would like to use this opportunity to ask staff to comment on the petitioner's requested changes to condition 4 and condition 7. Because seemingly it changes 7.
Through the chair, Ms. Moses, I thank you for the opportunity to address those 2 changes. With the petitioner's request to modify condition number 4, I agree with you. I don't think it's necessary. I think it is a resolve comment. It can be worked out with the petitioner, watershed management, and planning. So the added verbiage is, in my opinion, not necessary. With regards to condition number 7, the reason why I didn't address a specific tract to dedicate and resolve with the non-motorized transportation coordinator the need for that easement is because the non-motorized transportation coordinator did not comment in this case. And so in an effort to allow her the opportunity to work out with the petitioner the locations of these trail easements, I was not as specific as I would have liked to have been. I am not sure if the petitioner has worked out the locations of those trails easements at this time with the non-motorized transportation coordinator. So I'm reluctant to support the modification that the petitioner is requesting at this time.
Through the chair, thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Planning Division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503, or an appeal of the board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30.
Mr. Chair, just a point of order, and I don't know if we can go back to the last motion, but there was opposition from Ms. Moses to the amendments.
I'm not so sure that was opposition or
just a statement?
A statement.
Okay.
Was that opposition to, so that we needed to vote, or was it comment, Ms. Moses?
Well, that's what I'm kind of asking now. It's a point of clarification.
We'll pause.
You want to take a break?
I would love to take a break.
Okay, why don't you?
5?
If we announce it.
Okay. We'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll meet at 9:10. Meetings breaks over, and we're back in the meeting. And we have next on the agenda are reports. And I have the first report I have is Board Member Abel and Fuller are going to be reappointed to the board, and that's scheduled to be confirmed on the 9th of October. So congratulations. Thank you for your service, and thank you everybody. I want to thank everybody for their service. And Jody, do you know how long you're going to stay on the board? Is that temporary? Or no idea?
So I haven't been asked to stay. Would I have been asked? Or, you know, in a temporary, not reappointment. I was asked and said I...
In a temporary status.
Generally what happens is, according to code, even though your term expires on October 14th, you can serve up to 120 days
right
past that, or until reappointment, whichever comes first, kind of thing.
Right. So if I mean, I definitely don't want to see the board with the vacancy problem. So I'm certainly willing to touch base with the municipality and see how they're going with appointments, as not to put the board at a disadvantage, but my intent is not to.
From what I can tell, they do have a new person who's doing the boards and commissions of the municipality, and they were basically working on doing the reappointments,
right? Not
new appointments. I haven't seen any, at least on our boards and commissions, they've all been reappointments so far. So there are other vacancies. UDC has vacancies, and those have not come up yet. So maybe they're doing the easy part first, and we can just keep you posted.
Yeah,
I
think you're right.
Check
I
with
did
the
ask
municipality
about that.
That's good.
I lost my little yellow card my cheat sheet. I had it last night, and I don't have it today. Could you make another one of these for the next meeting? Okay, thanks. Okay, next item for reports. We were going to discuss tonight findings of fact. And so that's you. It's your turn.
Thank you. Oh, this is great. Yeah.
I can see you better from over here than I can from sitting over there, so I'm going to try it from this side. Questions continue to come up on findings and why we make findings of facts and conclusions. And what you don't have in front of you tonight are the little green cards that have a brief description of what you should be doing with regard to findings. What I've handed out to you is a kind of a cheat sheet of kind of why we're doing findings, the purposes for them, and so I will kind of sort of read and answer any questions you might have with regard to what I've handed out. They do help the decision-making body to focus on the statutory or ordinance elements that must be met in the case before the body. It encourages boards to make carefully reasoned decisions by requiring a clear statement of the reasons for the decision. They eliminate the need for an appellate body to speculate as to the basis for the decision that was appealed. And they also present in concise form the reasoning of the board so that a judge on review of the case can determine whether the law was properly applied and whether there was substantial evidence for the decision. The court cannot adequately review a case where the board has not made its reasoning clear. An aggrieved party has difficulty framing an appeal when no clear reasons are given for the board's decision. With that in mind, when you do make your findings of fact and conclusions, you're going to do your motion first, and it'll be in the form of a positive for approval, and that's going to be followed by your findings of facts and conclusions, the vote, and an announcement of appeal rights. Your little green form basically says that the findings of fact supporting the decision of the board or the commission must be supported by the record, sufficient to provide reasonable basis for understanding reasons for decisions, and in considering and applying approval criteria, findings should explain why criteria have or have not been met. Examples: does approval comply with municipal codes and standards? Cite the applicable code to this type of request. Does approval conform with comprehensive plans and or studies citing specific goals and policies? Does the variance meet each of the standards? And is approval supported by testimony? And why or why not? When you incorporate findings from the staff report, conformance to standards are addressed in the staff report and can be incorporated by reference as findings of fact if the board or commission concurs with the findings. But remember, that findings contained in the staff report do not show the reasoning of the board or its conclusions. So you need to state why you agree or disagree with the findings in the staff report, basing it on facts from the hearing and the record. So it's not just, I concur with staff. That doesn't explain why the board concurred with staff. And those findings in the staff report aren't the board's conclusions. Why is it not enough to just state the board has reviewed all the evidence presented and finds that all required showings have been made. Because it does not set out relevant facts on which the board relied on it for its decision, it does not relate those facts to the conditions that must be shown. It sets out only the conclusion, not the reasoning process the board followed to arrive at its decision and conclusion. The board must justify its conclusion. In addition, if there's an instance where there's been failure to present reliable or relevant evidence, it is best to state what kind of evidence the applicant needed to present and compare that to the evidence the applicant actually presented. Indicate why evidence was inadequate. Was it irrelevant, unbelievable, unreliable? Relevant contrary evidence was more reliable, possibly, that you received or heard, or that no evidence was offered. And I can only remind you, always tie the facts brought out in the hearing to your conclusions, because these can be appealed, and if you don't have findings that actually explain how you came to your conclusions, it can be remanded from the Board of Adjustment. The Alaska Supreme Court has also made decisions where findings are required on quasi-judicial matters, even if it's not in the ordinance. And if you don't have findings, they can remand it. And they have remanded them. And so there are a lot of, and it's also required in our code. So you did much better this evening on your findings. I can say that. And this was just something to sort of explain to you some of the reasonings behind why we need to do what, why you need to do what you do in order to make this record stand. Yes. I can't hear you. Not that I'm aware of. Most of the ones that we've done recently have been related to appeals of requests for rehearings of administrative decisions. We've had some requests for rehearings based on new and changed evidence at PZC level. We've also had something at UDC level. Dave,
There's been nothing on the Platting Board that's been appealed since this board has been together and since I've been serving as staff to this board.
It would have to be something we'd have to I mean, it would take research to find that.
There was one that I was, since then, there was one, since I've been on the board, that was appealed, and I believe one of the challenges is we didn't have adequate findings. So this is something, and then Karen mentioned Kincaid Estates. I was involved in Kincaid Estates. That was appealed all the way to the Supreme Court twice, and so it went through the court system, all the way through the court system. But there were adequate findings of fact in those cases. I just want to, I really want to stress that we do a better job as board members and making these findings and putting them into the record. Are there other questions? Do you have a question? Okay.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Dave, did you have comments on findings? You're good? We're going to do better? I'm going to keep asking for findings as reminders. I think what I would like, I know we already commit time to outside of this board or outside of these hearings to review and prepare, but I would like to see us every month spend a few minutes going through these recommendations and possibly even highlighting, like I've done tonight, and I've noticed that others have done tonight, actually taking a highlighter and marking the things that we're going to read into the record that are already in the documents that we can read into the record. So thank you. Are there any other discussions, reports? Dave, yes.
I'd just like to say one thing. You know, being a member of this Platting Board is a huge, huge time commitment, and, you know, we don't say thank you enough. You guys do a lot. You're here, you're reviewing this material, you're here all night. Thank you very much. We really do appreciate it, so thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Edmondson.
I just want to thank Jody. Thank you very much.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure. I hope you stick around for a few more months. But thank you.
I would now entertain a motion for adjournment. The board meeting is adjourned at, looks like 9:28.